When the US kicked off its disastrous and illegal war on Iran nearly 3 months ago, President Donald Trump repeatedly promised that the war would end very soon because Iran wouldn't be able to hold out against the mighty US, a claim, a prediction, that he and his cronies delusionally repeated again and again.
We are on or ahead of schedule in that operation. Expect to conclude it at the appropriate time here in a matter of weeks, not months.
There's just no way that Donald Trump is going to allow this country to get into a multi-year conflict with no clear end in sight and no clear objective.
At the end of the day, they do not have the cards, and they're coming back to the table for a deal.
Iran is just a military operation to me. Iran is something that was essentially largely over in 2 or 3 days.
As we've seen, soon is not coming soon enough, or at least as soon as expected. And even as the US claims a deal is underway, we're reminded that Trump's quick in-and-out Venezuela formula does not work on a country like Iran. How do we know this? Because just over 4 decades ago, the US got involved with a little something called the Iran-Iraq War. Let's take a stroll down memory lane, the kind of stroll Donald Trump should have taken before starting this war. The year was 1980. The Islamic Revolution had just taken place in Iran. The West's beloved Shah had been kicked out of power, and the new hardline supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, was making his own leadership ambitions for the broader Middle East pretty clear. Then along came Saddam Hussein, Iraq's own new dictator, secular dictator, who was eager to assert his own dominance over the region. In September of 1980, he illegally invaded Iran, launching what would soon become an almost decade-long conflict filled with World War I barbaric trench-style warfare, atrocious deaths, and most infamously, horrific chemical weapons attacks. Throughout the war, the US publicly claimed to have a neutral stance, but starting in 1982, the Reagan administration began to quietly provide the Iraqis with intelligence and military support in what was known as the tilt towards Iraq. According to Howard Teicher, who served on Ronald Reagan's National Security Council staff, that tilt happened just as Iran gained the upper hand in the war, causing the US government to fear that Iran would eventually cut through to oil fields in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Teicher would testify in a 1993 affidavit that it was in that moment, in 1982, that, quote, President Reagan decided that the United States could not afford to allow Iraq to lose the war to Iran. Worst of all, the Reagan administration continued its support for Saddam Hussein even after it had confirmed Iraq was attacking Iranians and their Kurdish allies with chemical weapons. In 1983, the State Department received a memo that stated, quote, "It is important we approach Iraq very soon in order to reduce or halt what now appears to be Iraq's almost daily use of chemical weapons." But, big surprise, the Reagan White House did not take that advice. Because when it comes to the Middle East, getting oil and protecting Israel are apparently all that matters to the US. In fact, after that memo, the Reagan administration became pretty open about their support for Iraq. Reagan's then special envoy, Donald Rumsfeld, even flew out to Baghdad to meet with Saddam, smiling bright for the photo op. Rumsfeld, who of course would later become a key architect of the 2003 war against Iraq, told Saddam at the time that the US shared Iraq's, quote, understanding of the importance of balance in the world, making no mention about the country's illegal use of chemical weapons. 3 months later, in March 1984, when Iran tried to get the United Nations to intervene against Iraq's use of chemical weapons, the US, at the request of Iraq, convinced the UN Security Council to water down its condemnation, issuing a general statement against chemical weapons without mentioning Iraq as the culprit. Then, in April 1984, Reagan issued another national security directive, this time urging the State Department to, quote, prepare a plan of action designed to avert an Iraqi collapse, including indirect security assistance and enhanced intelligence analysis and advice. The US then resumed full diplomatic relations with the country of Iraq in November of that year, with Reagan openly hosting Iraq's foreign minister in the White House, again in public, on camera, for all to see. And let me repeat myself, this was not some small scrimmage the US was supporting. It was one of the deadliest and bloodiest conventional wars in modern history, with Iraq killing an estimated 1 million Iranians and thousands of Kurds during those 8 years with US assistance. Just take a look at the Halabja massacre from March 1988 in the waning days of the war, where Iraq attacked the Kurdish village with poison gas, with bombs, sending an estimated 5,000 civilians, including children, into instant death, leaving 10,000 more blinded, injured, severely debilitated from chemical weapons. Then, 1 month later, in April 1988, there was the Second Battle of Al Fao, where Iraq retook the peninsula from Iranian forces by deploying an estimated 100 tons of chemical agents, completely razing the town. Behind the scenes, the US was providing Iraq with intelligence showing the location of Iranian troops, even while knowing Iraq would use chemical weapons against them. Retired US Air Force Colonel Rick Francona, who was in Baghdad in 1988, perhaps put it best, telling Foreign Policy magazine in 2013, "The Iraqis never told us that they intended to use nerve gas. They didn't have to. We already knew." This all took place just after Reagan ramped up the pressure on his Secretary of Defense, writing on the side, on the margins of a DIA report, "An Iranian victory is unacceptable." To this day, the US has never apologized for its role in that war. In fact, when the USS Vincennes accidentally shot down an Iranian passenger plane in July 1988 towards the end of the war, killing over 250 Iranians, including over 60 children, then US Vice President George H.W. Bush refused to show even the tiniest bit of remorse.
"I'll never apologize for the United States of America. Ever. I don't care what the facts are."
Like father, like son. That same year, 1988, the Reagan White House also went out of its way to oppose legislation that would have sanctioned Iraq, calling it premature and counterproductive. Now, Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khomeini eventually agreed to a ceasefire in 1988, following almost a decade of fighting, and after recognizing that his country was almost totally isolated on the world stage, receiving little to no international sympathy, even after Saddam's most terrifying chemical weapons attacks. So who was to stop Iraq from committing even more genocidal crimes against Iran? But even then, after 8 years, after countless civilian and military deaths, after unimaginable destruction of Iranian infrastructure, even then, Ayatollah Khomeini had to be dragged to the negotiating table. "Taking this decision was more deadly than taking poison," he said at the time. "To me, it would have been more bearable to accept death and martyrdom." Khomeini didn't want to do a ceasefire even after 8 years and being completely isolated. Why would the US have ever believed the new Supreme Leader, Mujtaba Khamenei, would be willing to do one in just a matter of days or weeks, when it's the US and Israel that are isolated? We should have known this. But here's the problem. Americans have short memories and never seem to learn from history.